Once again, once again, good morning, everyone. We are about to start our fireside chat discussion today, which is called EU-Ukraine Relations and Agriculture, Stormy Weather Ahead. My name is Nazar Bobitsky. I am the head of the European Office of Ukrainian Agribusiness Club, UCAB. This is one of the oldest agricultural associations of Ukraine that brings together farmers and agri-food producers from almost virtually all walks of life in the Ukrainian agricultural sector. And tomorrow, in fact, we will be marking in Ukraine a very sad second anniversary of full-blown Russian invasion into Ukraine. And today, the day before this very sad anniversary, we would like to discuss together with you the way Ukraine copes with the aggression, and we will look at a particular segment of Ukrainian economy. As we well know, Ukrainian economy now is the major backbone of resilience of our country in the fight for its life and freedom. And agriculture is a very prominent sector of Ukrainian economy, not least because it generates the bulk nowadays of export revenues that sustain our armed forces, our budget, and the livelihoods of our citizens. Let me quickly introduce to you our panelists. Today we have with us Mr. Oleg Nivyevsky, director of the Kiev School of Economics. We have Alex Lisitsa, the founder and president of UCAP. We also have Dr. Heinz Stubenhof, an agricultural expert and advisor, long-term advisor to the European Commission, to the German government and the Ukrainian government on matters of agricultural policy, agricultural reform, and trade. We also expect that later to be joined by Mr. Taras Vysotsky, First Deputy Minister of Agricultural Policy of Ukraine, and Mr. Taras Kachka, Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Economy and Trade Representative of Ukraine. And today we would like to discuss, to look at EU-Ukraine relations in agriculture through a prism of several questions that we think are most relevant today. As we all know, agricultural imports is now in the center, in the eye of a political storm in Europe, and particularly in the relations between Ukraine and its neighboring EU countries like Poland, Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, and Bulgaria. And we would like to discuss first whether Ukraine's imports of agricultural commodities really make an impact on the European market, whether this is deleterious, whether this is really painful and brings damages to our European neighbors, particularly European farmers and consumers, and where it will lead to. Also, we would like to discuss what is the likely economic impact of potential EU response to the situation, and also what is the impact of measures that have already been taken by our neighbors like Poland, Slovakia, and Hungary on Ukrainian economy and Ukrainian agricultural sector in the wider context of the war, of the difficult economic situation that Ukraine is facing, particularly in the year ahead. And we will conclude with a question, not with a question, but rather a speculation how Ukrainian agricultural sector will fare in a long-term perspective as Ukraine is preparing for pre-accession negotiations with the EU. And in the same way, the European Union is preparing to absorb or to invite Ukraine into the European internal market, into the European institutions and policies, and how it will affect a very carefully balanced and still apparently very fragile system of European agricultural sector. So before we start our discussion, I'm very pleased to invite to kick off our debate Dr. Alex Lisitsa, President and founder of UCAP. Alex, if you are with us, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Very well, Alex. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Nazar, for a very nice introduction. As you may see, I'm staying in a car. are not far away actually from the front line in the eastern part of the country. The situation is really stormy and windy, not only because of the weather end of February, but also because of the situation in the front line is really very, very stormy. But another one sign for me is critical, actually, that what I've seen over the last 2 days in the eastern part of the country, that the farmers are still preparing the soils for the next spring crops. And that's a good sign. So no one piece of land was left by farmers. They tried to do the best. Of course, not of them actually have done their harvest of corn from the last year. Not everybody has managed to be really good prepared for the next season, but everybody starts to prepare the soils for the next harvest. And that's for me exactly the sign for everybody that we are not giving up. We are fighting not only on the front line, but also in agriculture. 2 years ago, after the Russian invasion to Ukraine, the topic of agriculture was actually an almost practically everywhere in Europe, but also in the world, because Ukraine is a global player on agriculture markets. 2 years later, we are again the newsmaker, especially in European Union, because everybody tries to explain why Ukrainian grains are somewhere in the European Union. And there are a lot of different types of discussions. Part of them are not true, part of them are true. There are a lot of discussions about land grabbing in Ukraine by Americans or Asians. There are discussions about oligarchs. There are discussions about the not good quality of Ukrainian products, etc., etc. There are discussions which are needed to be continued, but they are discussions which should be clarified. So the idea of such kind of events, what we are doing today, is to start a dialogue with our partners in Europe to clarify, to discuss what is the Ukrainian agriculture right now, what we are doing right now, and what will be done in the future, because we would like to join the European Union. And we hope that we will do that. So let's start a dialogue about issues which are probably not really comfortable for everybody of us, but dialogue is definitely better than a kind of blockade, which we see right now in the Polish border, for example. So to start appropriate dialogue between partners is a usual way to start a good discussion about their vision of Ukraine in the future European Union, especially because of agriculture. So thank you very much once again to the colleagues from Ukrainian Agribusiness Club, which have organized that event. And I do believe that we will have a very fruitful discussion today about different types of topics, starting with a blockade of the Ukrainian border, but ending also with European policy, European agreements on Ukraine, etc. So let's have a very good and fruitful discussion today. And I'm very happy that a lot of people joined today us, and I'm really, really thankful for interest in the Ukrainian agriculture. And believe me, that's just a start. We are gonna, from Ukrainian Agribusiness Club, to organize such events bi-weekly over next months, and we will try to find an appropriate dialogue once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. And then without further ado, we jump right to the first question that looms very much acutely before the Ukrainian farmers and also before the European peers, the European farmers who already are ringing bells and taking to the streets, or rather to the border crossings across Europe and also with the border of Ukraine. So, can we really say that Ukraine's imports of agricultural products, commodities, be it sugar, poultry, eggs, or cereals, make a mess on the European market, and whether, let's say, what are the root causes of the situation that we face today? The situation is faced not only by the European farmers, but also, of course, by producers and in Ukraine, but also the consumers of agricultural products. We would need to take a hard look at the wider picture on the European market that affects all chain of agricultural production and processing from farm to fork. This is the famous expression used in the EU capital. Sometimes it really irritates people in Europe in the field, but this is the reality that we need to consider. I will first ask this question to Dr. Niewiejewski. director at the Kyiv School of Economics. Dr. Niyevsky, let's take a look at the European market for key European commodities, such as wheat, corn, rapeseed, in terms of consumption, in terms of domestic production, and of course, global picture of imports into the EU. Can we really say that Ukraine, let's say, is the single, let's say, the elephant that really smashes the China in a delicate European China shop? Are we really a price maker, or rather we are just a segment in the larger picture, and all other segments should be taken into account?
Thanks a lot, Nazar, for asking this question and for a nice introduction. In fact, I'm not the rector of the Kyiv School of Economics. We have another rector, Timothy Brik. I'm leading a faculty for graduate economic studies. So just a small remark.
But we don't tell anybody. We don't tell anybody.
Okay. Okay.
We have a strong faith in, let's say, in the direction that you lead. In that
Good.
sense, if I may.
Thank you. But in fact, the question that you asked is very serious, and I don't think that here we can talk just about economics. I think here we have a question of political economy, of various factors around and determining the current situation that we have on the border, and with respect to the farmers in the European Union. And this is not just kind of our fault for this situation. It's also, I think, a fault, or there are factors behind what's happening in European Union, within European Union, and I'll explain more about that. But asking a question about the price formation on the markets, I mean, that's a standard situation that we have in the literature. So the prices are formed on the global market, okay? So not just inside a certain country. So especially when it comes to grains and so commodities overall. So we have prices formed on the global market, and then take into account transfer costs, as we call it. So basically logistics cost, you can come up to the domestic prices. So this is how it works in terms of pricing. And Ukraine did have a certain impact on the global market. You can also you could also see it from what happened in the very first days of the Russian aggression, when Ukrainian ports were really blocked and the prices went through the roof in May, April, and they were sort of moderated a little bit afterwards when the grain deal was brokered and more of Ukrainian grain and oil seeds went to the global market. So in that respect, Ukraine has a certain driving force for the global markets. But when it comes to the what was put forward by European farmers when there were sort of protests, because the protest we have, we observe, it's not just happened yesterday or the day before. I mean, we were seeing this signs of protests, so to say, already in the summer 2022, when we had really long queues of trucks waiting to cross the border. And we have these pictures like 50 kilometers, 60 kilometers queues. And that was really sort of a sign that there are forces against, so to say, Ukrainian exports. And we were explaining at that time by the political situation in Poland in particular. And that probably was, to some extent, a correct suggestion. But then you see that nothing really drastically happened. And what we have right now is the kind of a sign of more global things that are happening in Europe and other countries, in Europe in particular. And when we were looking at the factors that were sort of put forward to explain why European farmers were sort of against our exports, we were trying to look at it from the data perspective, so from the evidence perspective, because you can talk a lot about some how to say, you can talk about a lot about some moral things or emotional things, but facts were telling that that Ukrainian exports didn't sort of break their market. So if you look at the prices that were at that time and now on European markets, they were certainly so dynamics was according to the market price. So this is really a key to look at when you analyze the markets. So if the prices are behaving the way the world market prices behave, then nothing really happens on the domestic market. So there is no kind of a flood of imports that really breaks down or depresses the prices, as many of the commentators were really putting forward. So we didn't observe that. Despite indeed substantially higher volumes of exports to Poland and other countries. And that was sort of logical because Ukraine was looking for alternatives because of the blocked exports by Russians. And for us, that was essential. And we were looking at, and we saw that commodities, goods, they were really demanded in the European Union and by the consumers in the European Union. And that's also another thing that we have to look at when we analyze the relationship between the European Union and Ukraine. So that's one thing. And I also mentioned that it's not just about economics, it's also about the politics and some what I would say possible development of the common agricultural policy that really affected what is happening right now on the border. And here, I would like to stress, I think this is already classical and it's not a kind of a secret that European common agricultural policy led to the fact that farmers in the European Union became relatively uncompetitive on the global market. If you look at the figures, you see that the share of subsidies or support, European support in the total incomes of European farmers, in Germany in particular, is about 40%, 40, 50%. I think that in the latest article in Der Spiegel, for instance, there is a nice article that journalist and academic said that it's like 48%, I think. It's really huge, and that tells why European farmers and Poland farmers in particular are so much afraid of Ukrainian agriculture, because in our case, in agriculture, in Ukrainian agriculture, we don't have that much of a support. We do have, of course, we have kind of a preferential taxation regime for agriculture, but still, it's not that high compared to the European Union. And that's why Ukrainian agriculture, is so much competitive and it's kind of not really a threat, but it's really competitive to European farmers. But that's on the one hand side. And I think this is something to be considered when we look at the dialogue between Ukraine and European Union. And I think these things will have to be solved through the dialogue, and through the explanation what's happening in Ukraine. But I think that overall there is kind of a misconception in Europe that just agri-holdings, we do have just agri-holdings in Ukraine. It's just not the case. I mean, we do have in Ukraine a space for all kinds of farm structures, agri-holdings, small farmers, and for the medium farmers, because the area in Ukraine is really conducive for various types of farm structures. And that's our strength, and we don't have that much of support, and this is our competitive advantage, and we would like to, and we will be happy to explore it further. Yeah, so this is in a nutshell as an answer to your question.
Yes, thank you very much, Oleg. I think we need to add a little bit more in terms of facts and figures when we look at the European market, because then will give us a credible, let's say, picture of the real situation. I have a question to Dr. Strubenhof. Heinz, do you think that when we look at the wider picture of the presence on the European agriculture markets of other global players, ranging from, first and foremost, the former member, now the closest neighbor, the United Kingdom, and also countries from the south of America and some other big players, do you think really that cutting trade agricultural imports from Ukraine, either through embargo of tariff rate quotas, would really help lift the prices, alleviate potential, let's say, supply glut, if we can say in this way, and make life easier to the European farmers? In overall view, just to give a background, the European Commission in January published a report of agri-food trade between the EU and major partners for the 10 months of 2023. And they mentioned first and foremost clearly that UK so far remains the largest agri-food partner in terms of export and imports for the EU. Ukraine indeed has seen the largest possible increase of exports, but also of imports from the EU of agri-food products. But so far, the overall volumes of Ukraine's agri-food trade imports into the EU remain at the level of 6%. So my question is to Heinz, do you really think that in an overall picture, cutting agricultural trade imports from Ukraine would make a difference? What do you think?
Thanks, Nazar, for the invitation. My answer is very simple, is a no. Of course, it's a rational no. And whoever has, let's say, a certain understanding of the EU markets would support this view. But we are not only rational. Yeah, so we have a lot of emotions in the discussions. Some of my relatives in Germany are farmers. And the situation now is completely different to 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we had high prices on world markets. We had low stocks. And now the situation is completely different. We have low prices and the stocks are growing. So, and farmers are feeling these market developments in their pocket. Yeah? And if you feel something in your pocket, you lose money, then you get emotional. So, and that's why I very much welcome your initiative, Nazar, and what Alex also said. We want to discuss these issues with our European counterpart associations. We want to discuss it with stakeholders in Europe to rationalize a bit these things, and to help to reduce the fear of European farmers. European farmers fear two things. One is the imports from Ukraine. Second, the large farms in Ukraine. These are, if you talk to European farmers, my German relatives, that comes on the table. So, and it's very clear that the exports from Ukraine are far too small to influence the market prices. Oleg explained it very well. So the market formation, the price formation is done on global markets. European market is a very big market, and the imports from Ukraine cannot really influence significantly the prices in the EU. This has to be understood by the Polish government, by the Hungarian government, and the Slovak governments, and they have to tell that to their farmers. But they are a bit afraid because farmers are in a democracy. They have a vote, yeah, in elections, yeah, and that's what makes the whole thing so complicated. But I think two things we should keep in mind. One is the EU is the regulator of the European markets and not national governments. So, and this is very important. The Commissioner for Trade, Dombrovskis, is the guy who regulates the market. And it's a bit tricky for him to operate in this operation. So the European Commission suggested in the update of the ATM, the autonomous trade measures, that will be prolonged, I hope, in June 24, There we have so-called safeguards for 3 products, and the products are sugar, eggs, and poultry meat. And this is a reflection of the European Commission of the farmers' protests. I personally think that's not adequate, but it's a reflection of the political situation. Kopa-Kožeka, in his last press statement, said we want to include corn and honey in the safeguards, which is honey, I think, is funny, yeah, because is there really a threat coming from Ukraine for the honey producers in Europe? So I would have my doubts. For the maize, I think it's understandable, but it's also misleading, because if you look at the figures, the EU is exporting grain. It's mainly bread wheat to countries in North Africa or other countries, let's say Egypt. And it's importing at the same time feed, wheat, and corn. And the demand is coming from the European feed industry and the food industry in Germany, in Holland, and in Belgium and in other countries. The grain that had been spilled at the Polish-Ukrainian border by provocators was a German grain. So there was a German buyer, and the Polish farmers, pretending to help the Polish farmers, they spilled it. So that was clearly a criminal act, and it's against not only the European market regulations, it's a simple criminal act. We should expect that Donald Tusk, who has the experience in Europe as a president of the European Commission, would act adequately. It is not acceptable that we have these things on European roads, but understandable that certainly some circles have a certain interest in these provocations. And so just to say, to summarize my opinion, and I think that's really important to tell the message to Kopa-Kožeka and to national farmers associations. The exports from Ukraine are far too small over the Polish-Ukrainian border or the Romanian-Ukrainian border, are far too small to have an influence on the price, especially now when we have the Black Sea ports opened again. So the figures in November, December, and January for the exports from Ukrainian Black Sea ports are very good. They are almost at the level of the pre-war level. And this is due to the success that the Ukrainian army had to fight the Russians, so that the Russians had to bring the navy away from Sevastopol. So this is very good news, and I think you should also tell European counterparts that's the case. But European farmers would also fear the exports, because in the market news that I receive from market brokers in Europe, they say, okay, as long as we have these big exports from Russia and from Ukraine in the Black Sea region, we cannot expect price developments in a positive way. So they are also aware of the international price formation that's coming from that side. Yeah, but I think we have solidarity lanes. European Commission is the regulator, and the Ukrainians should insist on international agreements when it comes to Ukrainian exports. Not to speak about the moral side of this. Yeah, 2 years ago we had in Warsaw and in Poland Ukrainian and Polish flags in the streets. Now we have only Polish flags. How can that be? Yeah, so I think we should expect from the Polish government, especially, a bit more action. And they should understand that there is a demand from Western European feed and food industry. I would also suggest to start a dialogue with the associations of the feed industries and the food industries in Europe. They are sometimes a bit reluctant to voice their opinion in the public, because the farmers are very good in doing this, but the feed and the food industries are a bit more reluctant. But I would suggest to start a dialogue with them, or to do it that you have with the Polish associations, for instance, to also do this with the Dutch, the Germans, and the Belgians, who have an interest in the Ukrainian feed grain. Thank you, Nazar.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Heinz. I wanted to pick up on a number of topics that you raised in this very rich expose. First, you very rightly mentioned, in fact, something that I would like to highlight, that the fact that the grain that was spilled by the Polish farmers from railway cars traveling in transit through Poland was actually destined for another member state, specifically Germany. Ironically enough, the unilateral Polish embargo on imports of cereals from Ukraine is still in force. So essentially, if we trust the custom authorities of Poland, all the grain that can be found in Poland is actually en route, in transit to somewhere else. So why should this be attacked? And in fact, I want to ask also you and Alex, as a practitioner in agri-food, as a practitioner agri-producers, do the national Polish embargo of some other neighboring countries makes economic sense? I understand that this is painful from a emotional perspective to see these demonstrations, but in terms of pure economic and even business sense, do they make sense to cut off import in one member state, while, for instance, so far we have alternative routes working with Romania? My quick question is to Alex: how the Ukrainian agri-food producers cope with this problem, whether it affects their, let's say, economic basis, and whether it really if you were a Polish farmer, would it really make sense to insist that no Ukrainian grain comes to Poland, considering that the European market is supposed to be one market, and if you import from one point, then it eventually goes to another point of entry in Europe? What do you think, Alex?
Thanks, Nazar. I can just add a few things what Heinz and Oleg said. There is no Polish market. That's a global market and the European market. So for me, like CEO of the IMC company, it doesn't make any sense to bring anything to Poland or to Germany via railway or via trucks, because economically it doesn't make any sense. So over the last few months, due to the new corridor, which was actually possible by Ukrainian army, we do export only via Odessa or via Danube, but 95% of export, what we do from the company, goes to the world market via Odessa. Economically, it makes sense. In the same time, I need just to add that we do make losses as well. So we do sell a lot. If you look on the numbers, for example, Ukraine has sold 6.7 million tons or exported 6.7 million tons of grains over different routes, majority 95% via Odessa route. But at the same time, if you should talk to the farmers, all of them will say we do make losses. We do sell our products on the global market with very low prices, especially wheat, but also corn. The only one product which makes economically sense for us is soybean or partly sunflowers. And that's the biggest problem for us right now. So not only the European farmers have problems with money and liquidity, and they have also empty pockets, but we have this as well. So that's not that, like, there should be not impression that we are right now dancing on the damages of European farmers and having full pockets of money. Definitely not. We are losing monies, and if you look over next months, will be the reports of the public companies. You will see the results of the agriculture business here. Everybody makes losses. And that's the first message. The second message is exactly just to add few numbers. I think that needs to be clarified in European Union that the problem is not Ukraine. a global market is currently completely under control, especially of wheat, completely under control of Russia. So Russia has managed last year to produce the record and export the record number of wheat, including the stolen wheat from Ukraine. So we do talk about 10 million tons which were stolen from Ukraine. So unfortunately, it looks like Russia will dominate the market of global wheat market again in 2024. So due to the information which is coming from the enemy country, Russia, they do expect again very good harvest of wheat, and they will put on the global market about 70 million tons of wheat. That will make about 30-35% of the global wheat market. So if you just look on the numbers coming from South America, especially Argentina, so they have also very good harvest of winter wheat. So those both countries, Argentina, especially Russia, they will over the next months or year exactly said, dominate the global wheat market. If you look on the numbers coming from Brazil on corn, that's the same story. Brazil in 2024 will be the largest export, even larger than USA. So the first time probably in history, Brazil will be the leading country on export of corn. So, and there are a few numbers which should be also mentioned in the European Union about other products, like, for example, sugar. That's exactly what Heinz said. We need to talk with each other about the details, about the numbers. And if we take a look on sugar, for example, Ukraine is not only one country which exports sugar to European Union. Look on Brazil, look on other countries which do bring sugar to European Union. So the question is actually not about morality, that it's about economic reasons. And the economic reason is, like 3 years ago, the sugar price globally was about $350 and currently is about $800 a ton. So the question is why? And what because like 3 years ago, nobody would be able from Ukraine to export even a ton to Europe or somewhere else because of the global price. And the global price has increased. So let's talk about why the global price has increased and what is the impact on the global agriculture and the European agriculture and agriculture production in Ukraine. So that's the topic what we need to discuss also between the businesses, between their institutions like UCAB, and we are very sorry, we do offer the discussion, we do offer the dialogue. So we are very open for any kind of discussion based on numbers and facts.
Yes, thank you very much, Alex. Immediately, a follow-up question pops up, and I would like to address it to Heinz. Two questions, in fact. First, now we see, for instance, what are the toolbox that the European Commission, the European institution, can employ to help European, let's say, agri-food producers to improve the situation. First things that come into mind, and which is also happily supported by agri-food associations in Europe, is trade cuts. But I think European Commission has larger instruments in their disposal than just trade. Probably there are some instruments within the common agricultural policy. What do you think, Heinz? Can European Commission be more creative than just limiting trade from Ukraine? What do you think?
Thanks, Nazar. Of course, the European Commission has several commissioners. So one for trade, Dombrovskis, one for agriculture, and one for the neighborhood policy. So and there are several instruments. But I think the major question that we have in Europe is, and Alec, I think he mentioned that in his introduction, the subsidies that come to the European farmers are sweet poison. And they don't make European farmers stronger, they make them weaker. At the same time, we have a lot of money. Let's say 25% of the budget goes directly to farmers, 9% goes to rural areas. So we have 1/3 of the European budget, which is huge, goes to the farm sector and rural areas. But it doesn't make the European farmers stronger. European farmers are weaker than their Ukrainian counterparts. Yeah, so that's that's somehow the effect. So that there are many who say we have to reform the common agricultural policy, and this is evident. So in constant terms, you see during the last years already that the direct payments to farmers go down. So if you in nominal terms, they may be the same, but in constant terms, they go down. And they are more and more linked to conditionalities coming from the consumers and coming from environmental groups. That's why we have the Green Deal in Europe, and that's why we have the farm to fork strategies. So farmers in Germany are 1%, but consumers are 100%. And if you ask consumers what they want from farmers, then we want animal welfare. 80% of the population want animal welfare. So there are societal needs to the farm sector, and this will continue. Although at the moment, with the farmers' protests, parts of the Green Deal will change. This is my personal feeling. I can't really explain it very good, but there are reasons that farmers are in the streets, and these reasons are not only the low prices or the exports from Ukraine. The reasons are also that the bureaucracy of a farmer is very high. So the farmer has to justify this and has to justify that. He has to reduce the fertilizer use. He has to reduce the chemical use. And the bureaucracy is very huge. And the farmers are also in the streets because of that. And the European Commission has to think about it. And we have also a few, the last decision of the European Parliament about glyphosate that is now remains in the market for 10 years is also very, very interesting to see. So there was a majority in the European Parliament against the glyphosate, let's say the decisions of the Green Deal. Yeah, so that was very clear against the Green Deal. So I would not say that the Green Deal will be abolished. No. But it will be smoothed, yeah, and so to smoothen the farm. But at the end of the day, the European farmers cannot expect that the European Commission can solve all their problems, because the problems are because the European Commission is subsidizing the farmers. Subsidies are sweet poison, and more expected. In my relatives who are farmers say, we want to be entrepreneurs again, and we want to take the risks, the entrepreneurial risk. We don't want to be civil servants of the German government or the European Commission and do this and this and this and this and that, because we become entrepreneurs again. If the society has certain requests to save the environment, to reduce climate impact, or to keep the animals according to animal welfare standards, then we are okay, and we take the money. But we want to become entrepreneurs again, and that's of course a problem for small farmers. And the structure in Europe is very bad. So it would be a very difficult political debate in Europe to reform the common agricultural policy. But it's inevitable, especially before the next budget cycle comes. The budget cycle now, it goes till 27. The new budget cycle for 7 years starts in 28. And there will be a fierce debate about the money, because we have economic crisis. We have an interesting situation in Europe. So there will be a fierce debate where the money goes. So that's from one end. There will also be a debate how to finance the accession of Ukraine and other countries, Moldova, Western Balkan countries, how to finance the accession of these countries. So there will be distribution fights, and very fierce distribution fights. And it's very good that you are sitting, Nazar, in Brussels, and follow this. And because this starts 2 years before 28, these debates start, and they are very, very fierce. And I would not suggest to Ukrainians just to sit at the sidelines and say, yeah, we accept whatever comes out of this discussion. I think Ukrainians can insist on certain areas when it comes to trade. We discussed it. Trade is not a threat coming from Ukraine. And the EU accession is also not a threat. We have these calculations from Michael Emerson that came out. Michael Emerson is a very experienced ambassador, and he knows the European Commission for decades. The accession of Ukraine is feasible, yeah, and it won't cost much more than the current Ukraine facility per year. That's the message. So that's why I have a certain. I'm positive when it comes to Ukrainian agriculture. I'm negative when it comes to European agriculture. And because the Ukrainian agriculture is strong, the European agriculture is weak. And the reforms that we need in Europe, they will lead to very, very difficult discussions, and they will probably even lead to more protests. But I don't think that somebody can give, let's say, even if the European Commission or national governments would have the money and the strategies, could give the farmers something that they would be satisfied, because the subsidies, again, repeated third time, subsidies is sweet poison, and we have to go away from this kind of policy.
Thank you very much, Heinz. I think you touched the topic that we will certainly go back later in our discussion, specifically regarding the pre-accession negotiations and how European and Ukrainian agriculture sector should prepare for this. There is one thing for sure, if I may say so, that very soon the European farmers would find that they have much more in common with their Ukrainian peers fighting European bureaucracy in terms of common agricultural policy, funding, and the European Green Deal rule book. And sometimes they might find themselves on the same side of the barricades. But we will come to that later. Now we have together with us Mr. Taras Vysotsky, First Deputy Minister of Agriculture, who kindly joins us today to bring his expertise and his views on the current, let's say, crisis, EU-Ukraine crisis on agricultural trade. I want to take this opportunity to jump immediately to Taras and ask him the following question. Ukrainian government, specifically the Ministry of Agriculture, together with the Ministry of Economy, are now leading the dialogue at all levels with our neighbors, particularly Poland, and also with the European Commission, looking for effective tools to resolve the problem and to avoid the worst, to avoid trade and import tax cuts that would benefit no one. Taras, my question to you is as follows. First, do you think that Ukraine can already offer positive lessons from its experience of trying to resolve the disputes at the bilateral level, for instance, with Romania and Bulgaria? What do you think are the reasons why, for instance, Polish side cannot yet rely on the experience that their Romanian peers have with Ukraine? And whether you can offer any recipe, for instance, or lessons or suggestions to the European Commission to deal with the crisis on the European level. Please.
Good afternoon, dear participants. Thank you for the invitation. Sorry for some delay with the connection to this webinar, but I'm happy to join and continue the dialogue with you. Thank you, Nazar, for the questions. Indeed, Ukraine has had already half a year of positive experience trying to issue hard things with Bulgaria and Romania. I will just the participants briefly once again repeat how the instrument or the mechanism looks. We have agreed that Ukraine introduces licensing of 4 products: corn, wheat, rapeseed, and sunflower, which were the most critical terms of production for our eastern neighboring European countries, including Romania and Bulgaria. And we have agreed that none of the licenses are given without the permission from the importer of this country, or not for the importer, from the government of this country. So we have agreed that if Romania or Bulgaria think that it is not necessary to import, there is no permission, there are no licenses, and in the end, there is no export. And not only Ukrainian official statistics from the customs service, but also the one from Eurostat demonstrates that really from this mechanism from September, October previous year, 0 tons of such products were exported to Romania or Bulgaria. But it is flexible, and for example, at one time, when one country thinks that it is beneficial to start importing such products, like did Bulgaria from January of current year, they just said, okay, let's start the licensing and giving the licenses for the export of sunflower seeds. And so far, this licensing have been given for a few, say up to 30,000 tons of sunflower seeds, for example. And they start receive some benefits from it by processing and so on. So it is a very indeed good example that when both of the sides are interested, it is not easy, but always possible to find some common solutions. And when we look only at some, first of all, economic or social economic benefits, it is easier to communicate. Because when we look, for example, now the case of Poland, Hungary and Slovakia is also important, but they are not so big by scales, yes, comparing with others. Like take the case of Poland. Poland has a very big agricultural sector. Poland is a very big exporter of agricultural products. So for us to understand, Poland exported in 2023, I think 47 billion euro export. When our all Ukrainian export agricultural was 22 billion US dollars, 20.5 billion euro. So it's almost 2.5 times bigger as agricultural export. And what's very important that we can see that first of all, there was a quite big increase by this export in 2022 and 2023 of the products like poultry meat, for example, partly some other types of meat, eggs and milk products. That's once again is an example that definitely there is a need of feed for these products. And then here we come to the whole European Union. In the end, the European Union does import products, does import corn, maize, sugar, poultry meat, other products from different countries, Brazil, Argentina, from Southeast Asia, from different countries. And so it's not the case that European Union doesn't need such products. They do import and do import more than we can export to them. So that means that actually we can find the common economic benefits, because anyway, it's not the substitution of European producers. It's first of all substitution of import from the said countries. And that's why we are influencing, first of all, focusing on it. Also, in general, our part of export in European consumption is still miserable. When we look at overall agriculture exports from Ukraine, in European consumption, it's 2-3%. It's miserable. So it's, to be honest, about nothing in real figures. I know that Ukrainian Agribusiness Club made some research that actually, and sometimes we don't even export enough to provide enough food for this 4.3 million of Ukrainians which moved to European Union due to the war and keep living there now and eating there. So I've been replying so long to show that in the current case with Poland, it's not about social, economic or other things. I think it's just about politics. Because when we look at any case of calculations or arguments and others, we do see that we can build really the win-to-win bilateral trade with members of the European Union or with the European Union in general negotiations. In the case of Poland, we do understand that it's different reasons, and so our idea is, and we keep communicating with the European Commission. So let's have like cold heads, let's look at the numbers and what it really means for also including consumers. Very good case is sugar, which price has grown twice or even 2.5 times since the last 3 years, and the sum decrease of import from Ukraine means once again even bigger prices. So and it's good that this dialogue is on the level of the European Commission is really on our side it's quite how to say it's constructive. It is constructive. But with Polish, let's keep today we have our governmental delegation on the border. We should keep anyway finding the ways to also resolve this issue, because we do understand that the relations with all of the European Union members are very crucial for us.
Thank you very much. Taras, a few housekeeping rules, which I forgot to mention in the beginning. Dear participants, those who listen to us and are eager to ask questions, please post your questions on the chat window of our webinar, and we will get back to them in the end of our discussion. I would invite also all our panelists to take their turns in answering those questions which they feel they are interested and have something to offer in terms of response. But for the moment, we are focusing on our discussion. We will come back to the questions of our audience later. The next topic I would be very keen to raise is the question of quality and standards. What our farmers very often hear from critics in Europe, etc., is that not only that Ukrainian exports overflow the European markets and make damage in terms of price, they also do not correspond in terms of quality to the European expectations, or worse, they do not correspond to strict European standards of food safety, or even worse, let's say, sustainability requirements. My question is to Taras, to Heinz, and to Oleg and Alex, to the extent that you wish to answer this question. Is it really the case? Also considering two factors. First, Ukraine, since 2016 or even earlier, has been involved as a party to the association agreement to a very comprehensive program of compliance, approximation to the EU legislation, also in the area of agriculture, food safety, plant and animal health. And at the same time, what we heard today is that if not today, then tomorrow, the dominant role on the EU market in terms of imports will be playing giants like Brazil, Argentina, and others who do not wish to become EU candidate countries, and worse, they do not even care about the EU standards. What's the situation in this respect? Is it how we would answer these accusations from critics? I would start with Taras as a policy maker, please.
Thank you, other colleagues. To begin, first of all, so it doesn't, such critics, it's a myth. It doesn't have any sense, because we do still have the border between Ukraine and European Union. It means that there is no free movement of goods as it is between the European Union and member states. The border means that each truck or each wagon, railway wagon, should go through customs service. And it depends on the type of products, also through veterinary, phytosanitary, or sanitary services, or some of them depends on kind of product. That means that all of it is checked. And either it is the customs service on Romanian side, Hungary, or Polish, these inspectors are authorized by European Union to check the quality and goods. And let's be sure there is no chance to move through this customs service with the products which don't meet the necessary requirements. There has been some minor cases within these 2 years. The last 2 years, we have received only 2 cases, officially only 2 cases, that there have been some checking and some doubts about the quality, but in the end, double checking once again proved that everything is fine. So we usually, there is an official procedure in international trade as notification. So when some products come to some country and they are checked and there is problems, the state officially receives this notification, which means that our state service didn't did the necessary job well. So we do sometimes receive notifications. It's not a secret by some grains and others, but first of all from Southeast Asia countries. So and we have received none of them in this case from the European Union. So it is it is not the reality. Our products, all of them which are exported, meet the necessary requirements of European Union. Furthermore, you are, Nazar, correct. Since 2016, we have adopted lots of requirements in SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary legislation in Ukraine. So our legislation in most cases is the same as in European Union, especially in animal husbandry, which is very important for European Union consumers. So the rules are the same. We think that it is beneficial because it means that also our consumers, Ukrainian consumers, receive the poultry, eggs, sugar, other products of the quality of European Union standards. So this legislation is in most cases implemented. We do now on the track of animal welfare, but it's about our attitude, animals and others. It's less about food quality, yes, or food safety. But in respect to food safety, all of the requirements of European Union are met. And I will just then show one example. In order to start exporting like any kind of animal origin products, we have to pass inspection as a state, our veterinary service, and then each enterprise has to pass inspection as an enterprise to receive the right to export to European Union. So it is really well controlled on the side of European Union. So we are sure that there is no issues in 99% of cases with the products or food which is exported from Ukraine to European Union.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Taras. Heinz, and when we look, for instance, at the southern direction, the imports of from Brazil and other countries known as the Mercosur bloc, does the European Union have enough, the Germanic word Nachtwachten, the night watches they can watch for European quality from that direction? Perhaps you might comment on this as an expert on international and European agri-food trade.
Yeah, thanks, Nazar. First of all, I would support Taras and that the Ukrainian exports, especially for grains and oilseeds, where Ukraine is a big exporter, there are very rare cases that we had during the last years of complaints. I would, in the discussion with Europeans, and the EU officials and national governments and federations, I would, although, provide a little bit more evidence about this. So I would say, yes, Taras, you are right, but provide evidence. Yeah, so for instance, the public veterinary and phytosanitary service statistics or independent control companies like SGS Control Co. Just to share these things with European counterparts and organizations makes a lot of sense. Then you provide evidence, and then it is very clear that the standards, especially for those commodities and products where Ukraine is a big exporter, are kept. There are some, I would slightly differentiate the argument when it comes to sensitive products. I've been in Brussels in discussions with Copa Cogeca, national farmers, and then of course the first argument is Ukraine has different standards for poultry. The cages in Ukraine are smaller than in the EU, and yeah. So and there are a few areas, and I would not hide the areas where the European standards are not yet met. And these exist. I would argue in a way that I say for most of the plant production products, the standards are world standards and EU standards. And don't worry, in the EU, Ukrainians meet these standards. There are a few areas where we have to harmonize with the EU standards, and we are on this way. We are on this way already from 2014. When we signed the association and the DCFTA agreement. We are on the way to have all the standards that you have in the EU. And at the day of accession, we have all the standards in place, and we are on this way. Yeah. So otherwise, you would, if you say we have all the standards in place now, then a few guys in the EU would look at certain products and say, but you have smaller cages, and then you have to differentiate. So, and now to your question, Nazar, I think the EU has no inspectors in Brazil and in Argentina for the soybeans and for the corn that comes from these countries. But I would argue in favor of Brazil and Argentina, similar to Ukraine. These are big exporting countries. And if you had cases with SGS Control Co. or other independent inspections, and these would be published, then you would also have problems. I would expect more problems in Brazil and Argentina, perhaps, than in Ukraine. But I would not think that this is a big problem for Brazil or for Argentina for the commodities that we have. For the sensitive products in the livestock sector, it's a little bit different, yes. But there are also the control mechanisms of the EU, the things that the EU wants from these countries are higher. And plus the sustainability standards, where you say, okay, we don't want the palm oil from Malaysia if that comes from destructed rainforest, for instance. So then I think these things for the oilseeds or for the grains are not a big problem for these countries. And I would not suggest that Ukrainians argue with look at the countries from Latin America or Africa. They have lower standards than we have. So that would be a bit tricky discussion and a bit dangerous. I would rather suggest to have let's say, to reason. We have the standards for 95% of the products in place. We have a few areas to look at, yeah, for the animal welfare, for GMO, for others, and for the packaging regulations. We want to harmonize, and at the day of accession, we are in line with everything. And dear Europeans, don't overestimate our competitive advantage when it comes to standards. Today, they are not high. So you overestimate the advantage that we have. And then give evidence about this, that you say, okay, Ukraine has public inspection services for 10 years working under the association agreement, and now with the EU accession candidate status, working on the EU harmonization. And we do everything we can to harmonize it.
Thank
And
you.
here is the evidence. From STS control code during the last 4 years, we have 3-4 cases. And like Taras said, no case came from the EU.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Heinz. Now we are moving to the last, let's say, block of questions in our discussion, the future Ukraine's membership, preparation for pre-accession negotiations, and the impact it will have on agricultural sector, both in the European Union and Ukraine. And I would like to get back to Deputy Minister Taras, taking advantage of your time, Taras, to pick up on your brain on the most important issues that much depend on the policy making in the ministry and in the government. In your opinion, let's say, what could be the 3 best examples to demonstrate that how Ukraine can reassure European farmers that through preparing through EU enlargement, it can, make sure that concerns of European farmers that Ukrainian agriculture sector joins the EU will be met, will be alleviated, at least in terms of, let's say, I'm trying to formulate my question. Ukraine will do a huge work in terms of adapting to the EU legislation. Can you give, in your opinion, 3 examples how this work will help remove the concerns from the part of Europe that Ukrainian agricultural sector will destabilize and permanently, let's say, destroy European farmers and agri-producers?
Thank you for the questions. In this respect, so of course, as Heinz said, there is no other chance. All of the requirements and legislation for the European Union should be fully in line before full accession. So we do understand it. So first of all, it's impossible to join and still have some separate rules of crops production or others, or pesticides usage and so on. But to really ensure that there are no such big risks to European farmers, I will repeat what I said at the beginning, and we are saying it to European farmers. Well, that in overall, still the volume of agricultural production in Ukraine is less than European Union import. That means that when we keep communicating and cooperating, this first of all means that we can join and keep making business, keep going making business all together without some necessity to close some farms in some of the parts. Of course, it's a hard issue of competitiveness, economic competitiveness. That's another, I will say a little bit about it. But first of all, when we talk about volumes, there's no such risks. That's first of all, we can substitute set countries' import and just be the member of the European Union, and it will be also our share of responsibility for the European food security. The second one is that, of course, it's a hard discussion and it's more about common agricultural policy, because what we see now, do understand that sometimes it's impossible to be competitive and at the same time follow all the necessary Green Deal or rural development requirements and have less prices of food or minimum prices of food prices. That's, of course, here we should we can also show that perhaps there should be some mix, because, for example, once again in Ukraine we do have lots of different types of farmers. And we also have, for example, from 2022, government is providing grants for greenhouses and orchards. And for greenhouses, the grant is up to 2 hectares, and for orchards up to 25 hectares. So it's not for big ones. And we do have cases also where the small, but in this direction, small farmers are competitive. So perhaps let's all of us together also honestly discuss which sectors can be still competitive and can carry about employment in the rural areas and rural development, and not so dependent on the size or economy of scales, and which ones should move on because it will be impossible to keep saving them as it is now forever, or it will be very, very expensive, which is once again is I think mostly impossible. And and also at that one, it's let's build common food supply chains, long-term food supply chains, where we can also plan and understand who is providing what for within this common big market, and have this. There is no quotes in most areas already in European Union as it was before. It's not necessary for quotes, but really to build this common food supply chains is also can support in the end, first of all, also to decrease the import from said countries and increase the food security by internal production within the European Union and Ukraine as a future member of the European Union.
Thank you very much, Heinz. Thank you very much, Taras. Now we are moving towards questions from our audience. Once again, I said invite our audience to put their questions on the Q&A window of our chat. And in the meantime, let's have a look at the questions. The most relevant question that I see here comes about the imports of wheat. And I do, dear audience, we already discussed in the beginning of our webinar the price impact of wheat imports from Ukraine. This video webinar will be recorded and eventually will be available on YouTube channel of UCAB. But I think our panelists would still like to give a quick answer regarding the price impact of wheat imports from Ukraine. I would reformulate it in two parts. First, can we really say that wheat imports from Ukraine do make a difference in terms of supply-demand balance and price on the European market, considering the wider picture of global supply of wheat and global prices? And second, what are can we compare the costs, the current costs of growing wheat in Ukraine, considering all the factors of war disruption and costs, for instance, rough costs for the European farmers? I would invite to answer this question Alex Lisica, Heinz Strubenhof, and perhaps Oleg Nivievsky. Who would like to start first?
Probably I will start.
Please,
thank
Alex.
you, Nazar. Just a few words about the quality once again and the around the world. We should not forget that Ukraine is in a war, and Ukrainian agriculture has reduced using of everything. Unfortunately, using of fertilizers, using of plant protection, etc. So the discussion that Ukrainians deliver to European Union products which do not follow requirements in terms of using of some kind of chemicals, etc., that's a completely bullshit, because Ukrainians, they do not use much chemicals as the European use right now, especially fertilizers. It only due to the very good weather of the last 2 years, we received very good yields. If that happens that year, we don't know. Nobody knows. But the only one thing which we have to thank, actually, that's a Lord, which gave us over the last 2 years good weather conditions in terms of rain. So everything else was done by Ukrainian farmers, and that's a kind of miracle that with less of using of everything, we have achieved such good results. But if we do speak about concretely about the production cost or total cost, doesn't matter. I can say that my personal company, we have achieved last year exactly say 6.8 tons per hectare of winter wheat with production cost about 160 USD per ton. If we add almost $30 of transportation and logistic costs to Odessa, so the price for my wheat should be about from Chernihiv region should be about 190 US dollars per ton. Currently, I do sell my wheat for $165 per ton, so making the loss about $25 per ton. So that's exactly the reality. Once again, please use for your discussion only the facts. And the fact is, unfortunately for us, that the wheat is making losses, and that will probably the case all the year 2024 if nothing happens in Russia, because Argentina is over. They do have a good yields. They have a good harvest. The same is also in Australia. So the only one question is what's going to happen in Russia. If Russia will have again very good harvest, including stolen from Ukraine grains, then we will have practically the same conditions like there. So once again, if you have questions about our production costs, we are very open. Just give us a sign. We can take a look on all the positions, what kind of chemicals we do use. We do invite you to Ukraine to look on our fields. We do invite you for a discussion about the using of fertilizers, production, plant protection, etc. So that's a not big problem for us. We have no secrets. We can discuss openly about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Oleg, Heinz, and Taras, would you like to comment, to add anything to this? Please.
Yeah, if I may,
Yes, please,
I'd like to add, I think this is important to add another perspective to our discussion that Alex already mentioned, that we are in this negotiation stage, in a sense, in a very special position and situation. We are in the war, right? And everything that is that comes to kind of operational costs, to the working capital costs, is on top of the is on top of the damages and losses that already Ukrainian farmers and agricultural sector already suffered. And if you look at the damages, direct damages, these are at the moment about 10 billion US dollars. So this is more than 40% of the capital that was accumulated in agricultural sector before the war is actually destroyed. So that means by 40%, Ukrainian agriculture is destroyed and needs to be recovered and reconstructed. I think this is something that we have to keep in mind because, you know, sustainability goals, green goals of European Commission and European Union is very good. It's very good for sustainable development, but we have our own needs, urgent needs to survive in a sense. And I think we have to kind of come to the balance between the urgent needs of the current time and you know, and the a bit distance goals of European accession. This is one thing. And another thing is kind of a bit global picture. We are the members of the one of the planet, okay? And we, at the moment, we have like more than 800 million people in the world suffering from the hunger. And I think Ukraine, as European Union, are responsible for this as well, because we have these good conditions to grow wheat and other crops and to export. And I think this is our kind of joint responsibility. And what actually Heinz mentioned in his discussion and his speech about, you know, that farmers in European Union are no longer sort of entrepreneurs, but civil servants striving with the bureaucracy. This is really a drag on the output, okay? So this is kind of, this is not serving the purpose of helping the people starving anything in the world, okay? Because this is, in the sense, these are the costs that decrease the output. And I've seen the studies trying to modeling the strategy from farm to fork, that's saying that if this is really implemented, European Union will turn from the net exporter of food to the net importer of food. And this is already kind of a serious issue, okay? So, and this is against, you know, I think our joint responsibility to feed people in the world of Ukraine and European Union. So let's keep this big picture in perspective when we discuss, you know, this picky details of European Union accession and the details of other of various things, because this big picture matters. I think the human has to be in the center of the discussions.
Thank you, Oleg. I see that question. Our audience keeps asking questions about also sugar and poultry, and I probably believe eggs, which indeed are in the center of debate driven by European agri-food associations like COPA-COGECA. So basically, the question is whether imports from Ukraine of sugar and poultry can, at this current levels, affect EU prices. We have discussed this previously in the beginning of our webinar, but probably for the benefit of our listeners, we have to address it again. So imports from Ukraine of sugar and poultry, and imports globally from all over the world or to the EU of sugar and poultry, do they affect EU prices? And whether, let's say, cutting imports from Ukraine on sugar and poultry would make a difference for European producers, and whether it will, and how it will change, or whether it will make life easier and more difficult for consumers. Who would like to answer these questions, colleagues? Perhaps can we start with Oleg or with Deputy Minister Vysotsky?
So we have to look at two things. Of course, really to understand, it should be built economic model. The market economic model, when you can put all of this inside, and then I don't know, perhaps KC already has done it, or if not, because I know that Kyiv School of Economics have lots of models, perhaps it would be really beneficial to make it scientifically to close this discussion. Yes, it would be the best one. If besides this model possible and then the actual results, you do understand that Ukraine is not the biggest importer of these two products to European Union, but also it is quite a big importer, still not the biggest. Sometimes when you look at such models, it shows that even 2-3% fluctuation of volumes can indeed create some price exchange due to also reaction of the consumers. So what we have seen during the last 2 years without economic modeling, but only looking at the figures, that indeed the European Union sugar market prices has a little bit grown not so quickly as the international ones at the periods of Ukrainian sugar import. Why we can look at it? Because we had some 4 months last year of ban, like in 2023 from June till September, Ukrainian sugar wasn't allowed to be exported to European Union and to any other countries. Still, of course, also the period of end of season, and usually there is some seasonal growth of price during this period. But if we compare it, for example, with the same period of 2022, when we started to export only from June, July, after the 5th of June, when these quotas were decreased or cancelled, yes. So, so comparing 2 years, we can see some correlations that these seasonal changes were bigger in 2023 on the European Union market comparing with the international ones than in 2022 when Ukrainian sugar was exported. But we do understand that scientifically it's not enough evidence to really prove that it's going to be like this all the time. So, so the best way is to build some empirical models, but such cases we had with sugar, poultry, there was no such ban. And we could see the influence of it even more. We even received some applications from Romania and other states to allow the export of sugar during this ban period. And we did, as the government allowed 20,000 tons sugar export to Romania, which also proved that it has an influence on internal prices.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, Nazar,
please, Heinz.
Maybe, yeah. So I would agree with Taras. Just two things that I would mention. From my time at IFC, I remember that Ukraine is the most competitive producer for poultry meat and also for sugar. Yeah, and so of course that is threatening for European producers. And it's very easy to discredit the Ukrainian producers because Ukrainian producers are very large. So you just go to Brussels as the Association of Sugar Producers in Europe or the Association of Poultry Producers in Europe and say, this is Astata, MHP, these are the big agri-oligarchs, and they flood the European markets. And there is a certain emotional element in this discussion. But at the same time, we have to realize in the EU, the sugar industry and the poultry industry is also big business. So this has nothing to do with the normal small farmer in Europe. So it's big business. And these big businesses are able to defend their interests very well. And I think it is not right to defend the interest in the sugar sector, for instance, because the prices are very good. The sugar beet producers in Bavaria are making money. Südzucker is making money. So even if the prices are influenced by Ukrainian import of sugar, the effect is not very big, and it will not lead to losses for the European sugar producers. Similar in the poultry sector. Yeah. So what I see is an emotional element in the discussion. That's why the European Commission in the ATM proposal for June 2024 included to freeze the export from Ukraine for sugar, eggs, and poultry meat, which is not very satisfactory for Ukrainian producers, but is a compromise in the discussion with the European producers. We know from Copa-Cogeca and also from the industry associations from these industries in Europe that they even fight against the freezing. They fight with Dombrovskis about the freezing. They want even less imports from Ukraine. So my personal opinion is that it is not a threat, but my personal opinion doesn't matter here. So I think Ukraine has to live with a certain compromise at the end.
Yes, but I think the audience has a right to have access to all kinds of opinions in order to have an informed debate and not to be influenced by emotions. That's exactly is the purpose of our webinar, colleagues. So please do not hesitate to voice your opinions and arguments, pro and contra, so to say. You're right, Heinz. In fact, we are now seeing, let's say, a titanic battle between European Commission that still bowed to the demands of European agri-food sectors and proposed automatic reintroduction of association agreement tariff rate quotas if imports for these sensitive products hit median levels of 2022-2023. And however, we're also facing a very different alternative when Copa-Cogeca argues for a complete embargo of imports of these products instead of tariff rate quotas, and also demanding lower threshold levels of imports, historical imports of 2021-2022. So I wonder whether colleagues could quickly comment to what extent, what would be the level of damage for Ukrainian producers if, for instance, the worst scenario would materialize. I wonder whether Alex, Taras, and Oleg would like to comment briefly, very briefly, on these two scenarios. Thank you. Who would like to start?
Well, to be honest, we are now calculating it. We have already looked at the volumes which we were exporting above the quotas. It's always the issue of price, because the price also has been changing during this period. But just we do our best not to have such scenario, but for the internal understanding, and we will share it also, I think, publicly. We are going to have these figures till the end of this month, end of February. In some sectors, indeed, we have exported like 20 or 500% more than the quota. So still, it has the influence. What is the exact number? We will finalize till the end of this month.
Thank you. Anyone else to answer this question?
Honestly said, I have no idea about the financial impact, but we need to discuss it once again internally and probably canvas numbers, because I would not initiate another big debate about big numbers without any kind of improvement for that. So I think the question is for everybody that, or for us actually, as initiator of such kind of dialogues with European partners, we need to check once again before we go to mass media, before we go to consumers. We need to check once again all the numbers and to be sure actually that exactly the truth, or that they are at least very close to true. So that's my last comment on that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. I'm afraid we are running out of time, but obviously we see that our discussion arises a lot of interest from the audience, both in Ukraine and in Europe. That's exactly what we are aiming for. So I invite our audience to stay tuned. This is not the last, let's say, morning fireside chat on EU-Ukraine agricultural issues. We will be back on the air with further topics, and our discussion gives us very good clues where to continue. So I would like to thank everyone, particularly Deputy Minister Taras Vysotsky, representative of Kyiv School of Economics, Oleg Nevievsky, and Dr. Heinz Staubenhof, Dr. Alex Lisitsa for their participation. And we do invite everyone to stay tuned for our next event. And the recording of this event will be available on UCAB YouTube channel. So once again, thank you very much, and until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
До побачення.
Побачення.